Tim Jernigan met today with the ensemble of media that was there to cover a defensive tackle. That's Philadelphia Eagles football for you. He's no longer going by Timmy. He is now just Tim. Tim Jernigan met the media today, including John McMullen from 97.3 ESPN.com, who chronicles his beautiful gold smile and a new first name, Tim Jernigan. What's going on, pal?
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
You got it. You met.
Sorry about the wind in the background.
What are you at Citizens Bank Park? You mosey over to the Phillies game?
No, but there is. It is a chilly day here in South Philadelphia, so outside at the NovaCare complex. But there's a lot going on because there's also a John Mayer concert later tonight.
Oh, how about it? All right. But you got a chance to meet Tim Jernigan today. And just off first glance, I mean, here's a guy who's replacing Bennie Logan, big shoes to fill. You look at his role in this defense, he sounded like, just reading your article, that he was pretty excited about the scheme that Jim Schwartz has for him.
Yeah, I see this all the time with defensive linemen, not to downplay it at all, because I do think it's a better fit for Jernigan, the Eagles, who are a one-gap team, instead of the Ravens, who are more of a two-gap sort of read and react team. But anytime you talk to defensive linemen about attacking the football, attacking the opposing quarterback, it's something they get very excited about.
Yeah, and that's something that Jim Schwartz is known for. I mean, a lot of people thought that Fletcher Cox last year was going to have big sack numbers, that from that defensive tackle position, because he had coached so many high-profile defensive tackles. So maybe Jernigan kind of sees something there for him in terms of getting to the quarterback.
Yeah, and he mentioned Jim actually already talked to him, Jim Schwartz, and said he expects big things out of Jernigan, so I think that excites him. But his history with defensive tackles is well documented. I think Fletcher played well last season, even though people expected more statistically. I think this is a better fit next to him, so it might work out for both players.
John McMullen's at the NovaCare Center today, where Tim Jernigan was introduced to the media, and you talked about the reason that he was traded. Did he sound like he was a guy who was disappointed or caught off guard by the fact that he was traded, or was this something he was anticipating?
Well, he was caught a little off guard by the timing. I think he kind of knew after Brandon Williams got the huge monster contract, this was probably going to be his last year in Baltimore. But the fact that it happened so quickly, I think that's the part that surprised me.
Yeah, the fact that, I thought, too, the timing for the Eagles was kind of interesting, that it kind of came out of nowhere. But this was something they needed, right, John? I mean, they couldn't go into this season because if they went in with Bo Allen, that's probably something else they would have to do come draft day. They'd probably have to check off another defensive tackle in this draft. Probably you can't just go into the season with Bo Allen.
Yeah, and that was part of it, because when we look at this draft, we always talk about corners are very big in this draft. Running backs are very big in this draft. Not a lot of depth at defensive tackle, though. So if you're looking at that position and saying maybe we can get somebody in the third round, well, you probably can't, and certainly not to this level where he's going to be able to help right away. So I think that was the thought process behind the Eagles saying, we'll move down 25 spots to get a player like this.
Yeah, John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, FanRag Sports, NFL. Eagles last week make that trade. Today, Tim Jernigan meets the media. And as you said, John, when they made the trade last week, you in fact said you thought this was a better fit. But is he a better player than Bennie Logan?
That's a good question. And I think they're really similar players as far as their value in a particular defense. And I think if they traded position, I think if Bennie went to Baltimore and played 3-4-2 gap, he would be a better player than Jernigan. But I think in the Eagles system, I think Jernigan is better than Bennie.
How do you think this helps or hurts Fletcher Cox?
Well, I think it's going to help him a lot in the pass rush aspect of it because I think you have two guys that can get an interior push. The run-stopping part of the game, that we'll have to see because it might affect Fletcher in a negative way on that part of the game.
Hey, John, also, one thing was kind of thinking about this. Jernigan's on the last year of his deal, right?
Yes, he is.
And then you got,
and that's an issue.
Right. And then you got Alshon Jeffries. You got a bunch of guys that they've brought in here seemingly on like 1 year type of deals. Next offseason is going to be very interesting. They got a lot of 1 year decisions to make here.
Yeah, it's going to be really difficult because you would think if these guys play, I mean, it's a weird situation to be in because you want guys to produce. You certainly want Alshon Jeffrey to have a big year. You certainly want Tim Jernigan to have a big year. But if they do produce, you're going to have to pay him a heck of a lot of money. And that's sort of the conundrum they were in with Bennie Logan. So you're only kicking the can down the road 365 days with Tim Jernigan.
Sports Bash here at 97.3 ESPN. So what's the next Eagles move, John, out of the NovaCare complex? Or are we finally done with all these moves and the next thing up is the draft?
Yeah, I think this is it before the draft, which is coming up very quickly. So you never say never with the Eagles if there's something out there as far as trades because, hey, Jason Kelsey's still on this team, Michael Kendricks. But I think that kind of stuff is more likely to happen during the draft or as we get really, really close to the draft.
Without seeing any of these guys, I want to loop back to something you and Mike just touched on. Without seeing any of these guys play a down of football yet, which guy is their priority to then re-sign, in your opinion?
Well, you would think if the guys play up to the level where you expect them to, it's got to be Alshon Jeffrey because that's a number one level receiver, and you have to build up around Carson Wentz. So that's the one guy where you say he can't be a stopgap.
John McMullen's with us, 97.3 ESPN.com. Hey, John, yesterday we talked about Richard Sherman, and obviously locally here, right, your colleague Tim McManus over there at ESPN.com. The first question, should the Eagles make a play for Richard Sherman? Is that a Howie Roseman type move?
Well, as I just said, you never say never with Howie.
Right.
And he's done things that have surprised me in the past. And I constantly talk about the manipulation of the salary cap, and it's a little bit overrated because of his ability to do certain things. So I look at that $11 million, and I say it's not feasible for the Eagles in their current salary cap, quandary. But it's a position of need. It's a legitimate number one corner. Problem is the dollar figure, $11 million, not only this year, but also next year. And there's a lot of thought around the league that he might be descending now as a player. So I don't think it's likely the route the Eagles are going to take.
Would you give up a first-round pick for him, number 14?
No, I wouldn't. But it's interesting because the Seahawks are kind of out there saying they want a starting level player and a significant draft choice. So if it were, say, Jason Kelsey, because they have tremendous issues on the offensive line in a second-round pick, then you really got to think about it.
Yeah, that would be interesting because if you have the second-round pick and you end up making it and you do something to get Sherman, and then you still in this draft, John, right? There's enough depth that you can maybe trade for Sherman and then draft two guys and have yourself a pretty interesting look, way different-looking secondary next year.
Yeah, I mean, and that would obviously, to get a player like that, an all-pro level player, that kind of helps everything.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, Jalen Mills is better. You have a domino effect that Patrick Robinson is better. So certainly from a football standpoint, it would help the Eagles a lot. I just don't think they're going to be able to get it done.
Yeah, and what you say yesterday, they're looking for a player and a high pick or something. What was the asking price?
Yeah, they want a significant player and a high pick. So to me, that says a starter and
so Nelson Aguilar isn't significant.
He was not. And again, that's not.
How about Jordan Matthews? Is he significant?
He is significant. Jordan is significant. But I don't think that's a fit for Seattle. They might not have huge names at the wide receiver position, but they're pretty good there.
Yeah.
Their issue has been, and their Achilles heel continues to be, the offensive line.
Yeah, that's true. I think that they've made a little bit of an effort this offseason to try to help out there. Let's look at some of the NFL news and notes here with John McMullen. FanRag Sports NFL, of course, covers the league nationally for them and covers the Eagles locally here for 97.3 ESPN.com. He is currently up at the NovaCare Center where Tim Jernigan met the Philadelphia media today. He's the defensive tackle that the Eagles traded for a week ago from the Baltimore Ravens. John, Ben Roethlisberger announced today that he will return. Not a big surprise, right? We all thought Roethlisberger was going to come back, right? He did contemplate retirement, and we really haven't heard anything from him until now, April 7th.
Yeah, and that's one of those things at Ben's age, and we talk about it all the time. Football's such a grind physically. When you lose, and you lose in a big spot like the Pittsburgh Steelers do, it's tough on you emotionally. So it takes a little bit of time to recover. Everyone thought Ben would, and he was going to come back. He certainly wasn't going to give $18 million back. So I don't think it's a surprise that he's going to play, and the Steelers kind of knew that. That said, they still have to start thinking about the heir apparent at the position.
Yeah, there's no question that what's he, 30, 35, 36 now?
35.
Yeah, so they're in a similar boat with San Diego and obviously New York, who all those 2004 draft choices.
Yeah, and a lot of teams. Arizona's in the same situation with Carson Palmer. New Orleans with Drew Brees. These guys are still high-level players, but let's face it, the finish line is a lot closer than the starting gun. So in their particular career. So you have to start thinking about who that next guy is going to be.
Who of those guys has the least amount of bullets left?
Physically, I think Eli. Maybe Carson Palmer's close. But I've been saying for years, I just don't think Eli has played well the past two seasons. Forget about the statistics. Watch the games. I just don't think he's a high-level quarterback at this point in his career.
John, I want to go back to Richard Sherman for a minute because when Mike was asking about him, I said something about the never-ending story. Now, on SportsCenter, Adam Schefter said it was his understanding all along that Richard Sherman initiated this and asked to be traded. Does that change anything there?
Well, that's completely new. And obviously, I'm not trying to downgrade Adam, who's more plugged in than anyone. But when you look at how this thing shook out, it certainly doesn't seem like it came from Richard Sherman's side first. I think the Seahawks were upset about the way he handled himself, and they wanted to put a scare into him. Maybe when that part started, then Richard Sherman said, "Hey, I want out of here."
Yeah, that whole Sherman thing. That's an interesting point there that you just brought up. That the Schefter thing there, that is basically saying that he initiated that. But correct me if I'm wrong. We talked about this yesterday. The GM out there, he had confirmed that they were trying to talk about getting him out of there.
Yeah, and Pete Carroll confirmed it at the spring meetings, and the rumors started before that. So I found the timing questionable on that report. And a lot of times, let's be honest, reporters try to do favors for agents, and that's sort of how you get your ins and break stories. Not saying that's what happened here, but I think it came from the Seahawks first.
Yeah, you wrote about this at FanRag Sports NFL, by the way. John McMullen with us. Read that piece at JF McMullen on Twitter on Marvin Lewis, who said he's not expecting an extension. Do you kind of put him into the hot seat realm here? Is Marvin Lewis ever going to be on the hot seat?
He should be on the hot seat because I always say every time Marvin Lewis coaches another game, he sets another record because nobody has ever coached more games with one team and not won a playoff game,
right?
Than Marvin Lewis. But now, while you say that, he's made the playoffs 7 times. And the Cincinnati Bengals, before he got there,
right,
were not exactly a franchise steeped in a winning tradition. So from that standpoint, he's been a success. But at some point, the rope has got to end. And if they miss the playoffs for a second consecutive season, you certainly think he has to be on the hot seat.
John McMullen with us. I saw some video, John, where Greg Hardy was signing up for the spring league at his water bottle and sitting at the computer to log on to this league and get himself registered. The free agent he's among the veteran free agents taking part in this spring league. Is there any team out there, John, that would bring back Greg Hardy to the NFL?
I don't think so at this stage. There's just too much that's in his history at this point. And if you think about this guy as a whole, first it was mixed martial arts. He wanted to go into that. He's trying to make a comeback in obviously in the NFL with the spring league. He's just done too many things. And it's not only the domestic violence. Remember, his last year in Dallas, he was a bad teammate. He was arguing with players, coaches, so that enters into it as well.
All right, John McMullen, all the NFL news and notes there, plenty of them. Draft 3 weeks away. We'll have more on that Monday. Of course, you can get all your Eagles news at 97.3ESPN.com, at JF McMullen on Twitter, and check out FanRag Sports NFL for all of John's NFL coverage. All right, enjoy your walk, pal.
Hey, thank you, guys.